Hi folks, Tacitus Today. Tacitus Today is your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to cover something that I cover frequently, which is the way the law is being perverted and trashed and taken out back and proverbially taken out back and shot all across the Western world. Facts, the law, evidence, unbiased judges, juries that are impaneled who you can be confident are going to be as close to impartial as you can get. All these sorts of things are not disappearing. They've gone from the West. You'll find isolated judges here and there, usually the senior ones who haven't yet retired, who still believe in the independence of the judiciary. They still believe in evidence and facts and the rules of evidence and so on. But those judges are fewer and by the day, are fewer and fewer in number. And it shows what a huge debt we owe to Donald Trump's presidency, that he put constitutional judges onto the Supreme Court. Because if that hadn't happened, we'd be roasted and fucked by now. The Democrats, the globalist controlled Democrats, would have run absolute riot. At least there's a limited break on their and restraint on their actions via the Supreme Court. But I want to look at a situation in Australia just recently. It's exploded recently, and it just again illustrates clearly and succinctly illustrates the extent to which the law has been politicized by radical ideologies, and feminist ideology in this case, but it could be other globalist ideology in terms of race. I mean, race, gender, and sexuality, as in trans and LGBT. Those are the big three that they use. Now, this one's a gender thing, but it's a regional government that was renowned for being very, very left of centre and for wanting to be falling over themselves to be seen as super progressive. And they sort of apply that with much aggression to be seen as the most progressive. And if another regional government in Australia says that we give 10 days off a year for women domestic violence victims who need not prove it, and these guys will do 11 days. They've always got to go one better. These guys were so crazy, you couldn't have an amateur adult sports fixture anywhere in the region unless you had at least one woman on the team. It could be an all women's team, that was fine, but it could not be an all men's team. I mean, that's the extent of the madness of these guys. And I was there one day, and there was a football team that was short a player, and so they asked. I knew one of the guys was doing it. He said, "Look, Billy Bob, can you come and fill in here? We're going to be short a player." And they gave me some kit to play, so I was okay with that, and acquitted myself rather well, actually. But nonetheless, but when we went to start, they said, "No, we can't start." So I said, "Well, why not?" And well, we haven't got a woman here. Like, well, it's a men's football game. Who cares? No. The law is you can't have an adult amateur unless you have a woman in the team. It could be either team, it doesn't matter, but it has to be in the team. Now, it doesn't have to play for the whole match either, but there are spies and people who inform and can get fined and dragged through the courts and so on. Because they're very serious. They enforce this quite vigorously, or so I was told. And so there was this crazy situation where a guy had to call up his daughter, who apparently had turned 18, the day before or something. And she turned 18 yesterday. She'll call her. She didn't want to come, so then he has to bribe her, saying, "Well, I'll give you $50 if you can." Oh, okay. And so she came. She kicked the ball for like 10 seconds, but that was all that was needed. That was it. The left wing bullshit had been acknowledged, and so everybody was happy now. I mean, that's the insanity of it. Now, this same government, as you can imagine, they employ some very radical leftists in their Department of their Department of Justice, or their equivalent of Department of Justice, and they're absolutely chocked to the rafters. The judges that they pick are also, very left-leaning. I don't think you'd find anybody who was middle of the road there, and if there was anyone in the Department of Justice middle of the road, they probably find themselves looking for a new job. So you're talking about an entire group of activists. Now, there was a woman who alleged she'd been raped, but there was no evidence. It was a he said, she said. There was no evidence. The evidence that was available, which was, didn't really support her story. So on the strength of it, you just wouldn't take something like this to court. The Justice Department, the Department of Prosecutions just wouldn't bother with it. Going, well, the evidence is so vague that it's and so again, no physical evidence. They any sensible person would have dropped it, but these are super progressives. So we can sort of imagine the conversation around the table. They're looking at the cases that they may want to prosecute. The guy who heads it up is a radical leftist, very much involved in feminist causes and this sort of thing. He's not an impartial player, and so when you appoint somebody to be head of your prosecutions department who is a radical activist, you know that they're going to behave like a radical activist. So the decision to appoint those people, not just him, but others in the department, the decision to appoint them is because you want a radically activist. Now, being radically activist doesn't matter if you go by the evidence, the facts, and the evidence and the due legal process. If you go by that, then it doesn't matter how activist you are. You're very constrained because you must produce the evidence and it's tested in an impartial court. Now, the court was still somewhat impartial. I wouldn't say they're impartial, but they're somewhat impartial. But this Department of Prosecutions was radically, in my opinion, it was radically activist. So they sit around the table, the Monday morning meeting or some equivalent, and well, we've got this case here where this woman alleges she's been raped, but there's not really any evidence. Well, we have to take this case. We have to prosecute it to show that we support women. We must show it's a symbol of support, symbolic support of women that we take this. Who's the guy? Well, he's a straight white male. No, we have to take it to court. We have to take it to court. It's a straight white males are the oppressors. They're the Hitler, the fascists, the Nazis. This guy may even be Hitler. So we have to take it to court for ideological reasons. Well, the evidence is pretty scant. It doesn't matter. Ideologically, we must do it to support women, to show that we support victims. So these ideological fanatics are around the table. A sensible person would say, well, no, there's no fucking evidence. It's a he said, she said thing. The circumstantial evidence suggests that there's nothing here. Doesn't matter. The activists are screaming by now, rolling around, tearing at their hair and biting the toilet seats and all this. We have to do it because we're fighting back against Hitler. So that's the setup there. So they decide to take the matter to court, but the head of the Justice Department knows it's a weak case. So they send a communication to the judge suggesting that they've got a lot more evidence than they really do. This is my understanding. A lot more evidence than they really do because the judge has the authority to throw the case out. Then on top of that, wait for this, on top of that, they then conceal evidence that suggests that the claim is false, that the guy in fact didn't rape anybody. There was no rape. No rape took place. So this is the claim. So this is the evidence. So what can you believe this? This is the guy in charge of the Justice Department. So the guy hides the evidence, the exculpatory evidence that would maybe not conclusively prove the guy's innocence, but certainly would strongly suggest it. So it would very much weaken the woman's case. And then artificially inflates or makes allegations of the evidence they do have against the guy. Now, if they presented the evidence that they had, there's a very good chance the judge would have thrown it out to say, look, there's nothing here to go on. Why are we going to waste time and effort on this when the evidence is so scant and circumstantially isn't very strong anyway? So there's a chance that, but the prosecutor didn't want to run that risk So instead, added a layer of bullshit onto the allegations, but then sent this privately to the judge. This wasn't presented to the accused guy. Wasn't presented his defence. Now, these are outrageous trampling of due legal process and the rule of law. So the rule of law is not being applied equally. The woman who's making the accusation had to meet a much lower standard of proof, and the man who's defending himself had to meet a much higher standard of proof. And this is the classic ideological law of our times. The oppressed shouldn't have to prove anything, but the oppressors, they should have to prove everything plus a million things more. So this is how what they do now. So it went to court, and the woman was getting all sorts of NGOs and action groups were funding her and helping her and advising her. The guy didn't get any, he had to pay for everything. The guy got no help. The media was squarely on her side. Yes, she was raped by that evil fucking Nazi. So the media really went to town and effectively, this is before the trial even started, effectively accused this guy of being guilty. The girl was used as a poster child by the feminist activist groups, generously looked after by the NGOs. How much she was paid to do this is unknown, and whether this was payment as in a salary or payment as in kind, such as transport and accommodation, things like that. So legal advice she didn't have to pay for. So the state, picked up the tab for this and went after this guy when they had no evidence, and the evidence they did have strongly suggested he didn't do it, but they still went after him. And they tried as far as I understand, they tried to get him to cop a plea deal, these sorts of things, but he was, no, I didn't do it, fuck off. And good on him, all the power to him for taking that principled stance. And he should, and I'm glad that he did. So the first trial fell over because of alleged misconduct. Now, juror misconduct. Now, this misconduct was it went like this: that a court official was supposed to be tidying up the room, and one of the jurors allegedly left a document that allegedly fell out of the packet that the guy cleaning up the court found, and he allegedly read it and decided that it was inappropriate for a court. This is just a cleaner, for fuck's sake. It was inappropriate for a court hearing, and showed it to the judge. The judge then, and so on, and so the trial was aborted. Now, the trial wasn't going well for the woman. It was some of her allegations were proved to be inconsistent, and to say the least. And it's dubious that very doubtful that a conviction would have been secured. Anyway, so retrial is called. Then this same prosecutor went after this guy who's in my view has hidden evidence and also invented or fabricated other evidence. He decides it's going to be too stressful for the poor little woman to have another trial, so she might harm herself. Is again a classic ideological position. So he says not worth pursuing it. Then it's discovered that in fact, he'd engaged in what I will allege is blatant and brazen illegal acts of illegality. This is the head of the prosecution, blatant and brazen illegality, and in order to secure a conviction for ideological reasons. The guy wasn't guilty of anything, but ideologically, they just had that we have to show our support to women. We have to fight back against Nazis. We must do this, and this is the. So insanity. Wait, stop. You're meant to be representing the Justice Department. The rule of law, due legal process, evidence, facts. That's your fucking job, you cocksucking moron. But instead, they go down the ideological path. And really, the chances of them getting caught were pretty slim. So they thought the risk was worth it. Ideologically, let's do it. The risk is worth it. And so that's what they did. And whether this guy just gets fired or gets prosecuted or anything like that, but I invite whoever's listening to this vid, I invite you to go and look at the Duke Lacrosse case, and the district attorney there, who again fabricated evidence and hid evidence in order to secure a conviction of straight white boys. Ideologically, he just couldn't not do it, and was pretty confident he'd get away with it. And given the amount of times it happens, and the times it's discovered, the only times it's discovered if a very resolute and often wealthy guy who's been accused decides to fight back. That's the only time this malfeasance is discovered. Can you imagine how many men are sent to the chopping block on bullshit charges just because they either, they don't understand the law, or they've got poor representation, they got no money, or whatever it might be. But they say, oh, well, okay, I'll accept 6 months of going out. And then we secured a conviction. We got another straight white boy, fucking straight white boy Nazi. Now, why are they into the straight white boys? So why do they want to get the straight white boys? Well, ideologically, they see the straight white male as the oppressor. The black guys, the brown guys, okay, they behave badly and they've got a bad attitude to women, but we can get them anytime we want. But with the white boys, they are in the ideological cultural terms, they are the primary oppressor. They are the Nazis, and we have to get the Nazis, and we have to get them, the straight white male. But they can only get them on very technical grounds, because straight white males, certainly middle-class straight white males, very rarely would. I mean, I'm sure you'll find some, but the chances of a rape are rare. In my cognizance, for example, I can't even conceive how a rape would take place. Why would you want to have sexual intercourse with someone who's clearly doesn't want it and is frightened, why would you even want to do that? It's beyond my comprehension. But then, I'm not an expert, I guess, on that. But so straight white guys, if you're going to get them, it has to be on technical terms. There has to be the technical element of guilt here, or consent. So you have to be able to say, well, she had one glass of wine too many. So technically, even though she gave consent, technically that consent is invalid because of that extra glass of wine. Because the consent is invalid, that means you raped her, you motherfucking Nazi. And that's how it goes. So they use these very technical interpretations of the law in order to nail the straight white guys. But they'll put vast resources and go with absolute aggression and vigor after the straight white guys. But they're quite casual. There's another black guy did it. Who cares? And so it's at the very forefront of ideology. Now, the other thing too is, in the rape industry, it mass attracts angry lesbians, and so they are determined to punish straight white males for being straight white males. And so you get this natural tempo and temperature of high, fever pitch activism all through that. Now that has to be addressed. If I was in charge of the Justice Department, I'd go through that place like a fucking dose of salt. You are here to administer the fucking law. That's it. Not to be ideological fanatics, but that's something that's been lost. Nearly the entire legal system of the West has been taken over by ideological fanatics, and this is what happens when they take over. You've been with Tacitus today. You're Pushback Channel. Thank you for listening.